First of all, I wanted to just touch base with you on two results that we've seen recently, MRS and Total. MRS, maybe we can start with that. We saw PAT up 53%. What is driving that performance?
Basically, for the sector as a whole, what we see is some slight changes in the administration of the reimbursement process for the petroleum marketers, which is, of course, beginning to affect the bottom line. But for MRS in particular, if you compare last year's results, the last financial year wasn't a particularly great year for MRS. In the first quarter of the year, they had some union problems, strikes, and for around about 2 months or so, they weren't really operating optimally. So that had an impact for the performance for the year. So by the time you compare it year on year, you would notice that this year's number were particularly more emphatic than what we saw in the last year. But if we're looking at in terms of margins and comparing it to what the other petroleum marketers are doing, you would notice that the margins for MRS is still lagging the recent developments we've seen in the petroleum marketing sector.
Let's talk. I wanted to talk about Total, but we can move on to these developments you are talking about. We've seen that there has been some kind of reorganization of how the subsidies are getting to these petroleum marketing companies. Can you just give us your thoughts on that?
Yes, basically how that works is when the marketers need to apply for reimbursements or petroleum equalization, as they call it, the adjustments. The marketers put in an application, and then it goes through all of the processes involving the PPRA, involving the DPR, and of course the Federal Ministry of Finance. And then the new leg that has come in now is that petroleum marketers are now issued a sovereign debt note by the DMO. Mm-hmm. And of course, when they get these notes, they go to a bank and discount these notes. Right. So they get cash instantly. The entire process is for getting the SDR, that is the notes, typically takes about 10 days. And then the entire process itself, before when the banks actually get reimbursed, can actually present these notes to the central bank, it was the bank of the government anyway, about 45 days. What we've noticed that for the petroleum marketers, it has shortened the period in which they get back their money. So it's helping them in their operations. They can do better funding, overall better financing for the sector as a whole.
So it's the whole financing that has changed, the financial structure for them.
That is basically
what has changed. And that's also impacting on margins. But by how much now? To what extent are margins changing for this?
Yeah, on the average, we've seen margins improve by at least 400 basis points, if I recall.
And that's from a very low base. I think it was about 2-3%. Yeah.
Pre-tax margin, basically industry average around 3-4%, but now we're beginning to see 6-7-8% for some companies. The likes of Total even did 9% in the first quarter numbers reported. So I think overall it is beginning to make these companies basically declare more on the bottom line. But for the top line, we've again, it remains what it is, marginal growth, really.
Right. Okay. But now let's speak about the outlook for the sector now. The regulation has been a sticky issue over the last few years, and the most recent strikes, the most recent protest and against fuel price hikes, and of course the shortages that followed. It's been several months since we've seen that. But what, in general, will you say is your view of the regulation, and how quickly is this likely to happen?
I think the new process that has been put, as we discussed earlier, has set in a lot more confidence in the system. The petroleum marketers can easily get finance when they wish. The banks the notes are backed by the federal government, so the banks are more willing to lend to the petroleum market.
So in essence, the urgency for the regulation is no longer there? Is that what you're saying?
It is still there. It is still there, I would say, because from my numbers, last numbers from CBN, reimbursements, petroleum subsidy, accounted for about 33% of current expenditure for the year 2008. You can imagine what that is.
It is. So it's a huge burden on the government.
It's a real
obviously.
burden on the government. So I think it's something that is inevitable.
It's going to happen at some point.
It's going to happen, but I don't think we're going to see it anytime until after the elections. It's a quite sensitive period in the Nigerian polity right now, so you wouldn't want to be seen as hiking fuel prices or causing instability in the system.